The awakening. The first sound Zoe Nakamura heard after 3 centuries of silence was the metallic groan of her preservation pod opening. Her lungs burned as they drew in their first breath in 307 years, filling with air that tasted of metal and ash. The pod's internal systems had maintained her physical form perfectly, but nothing could have prepared her mind for waking up 3 centuries later. Vital signs stabilizing, announced an automated voice as the pod's diagnostic systems completed their final checks. Revival protocol completed. Welcome back, Dr. Nakamura. Zoe's fingers trembled as she reached up to touch her face. Her skin felt strange, too smooth, too perfect, as though time had forgotten to age her. The last thing she remembered was the blaring of emergency alarms, the panicked voices of her colleagues, and the horrifying realization that the temporal engine had destabilized beyond their ability to control it. "Hello," she called out, her voice cracking from disuse. "Is anyone there?" The only response was the whirring of the pod systems powering down. Zoe reached for the edge of the pod and pulled herself upright, muscles protesting despite the pod's anti-atrophy protocols. As her vision adjusted to the dim light, she saw that her laboratory, once a beacon of technological innovation, was now little more than a crumbling ruin. Thick layers of gray ash covered every surface except for a perfect circle around her preservation pod, where the activation energy had cleared it away. "What happened?" she whispered to the empty room. "Where is everyone?" She climbed out of the pod, her movement sending small clouds of ash billowing around her feet. The reinforced walls of the laboratory had mostly held, but through a collapsed section of ceiling, she could see a sky that was a sickly shade of amber instead of the vibrant blue she remembered. Zoe made her way to what remained of her workstation, ash crunching beneath her feet. The quantum interface terminal, once the pinnacle of technological achievement, was now an unrecognizable lump beneath the gray powder. A sudden noise from beyond the laboratory walls made her freeze. Voices, human voices. After a moment of stunned silence, Zoe rushed toward the sound, stumbling over debris in her haste. "Hey, I'm in here," she shouted, her voice echoing through the ruins. "Please help." The voices quieted, then grew louder as they approached. Brilliant beams of light cut through the gloom as the heavy security door to the laboratory groaned and was forced open from the outside. 5 figures in advanced environmental suits stepped through, their helmet lights scanning the room before settling on Zoe. "Holy stars," one of them said, voice distorted through the suit's communication system. "We've got a survivor." The tallest of the figures stepped forward, helmet visor depolarizing to reveal a weathered face with deep-set eyes and a close-cropped silver beard. "I'm Captain Riker, expedition leader," he said, studying her with obvious suspicion. "And you shouldn't exist. This planet's been dead for 3 centuries. 307 years, Zoe corrected automatically, her scientist's mind clinging to precision even in the face of shock. "I'm Dr. Zoe Nakamura, lead physicist on the Temporal Engine project." Riker's eyes widened slightly, the only indication of his surprise. "The Nakamura, the one who?" "The one who supposedly destroyed an entire world," Zoe finished for him, a bitter edge to her voice. "That's what they're saying, isn't it?" Before Riker could respond, another expedition member stepped forward, helmet still fully polarized. "Sir, we need to get her out of here. The Chancellor's shuttle is docking in 30 minutes and Director Varro wants us back before the diplomats arrive." Riker nodded. "Dr. Nakamura, we have a lot to talk about, but this isn't the place. The entire planet is unstable, temporal anomalies, structural collapses, crystalline formations that weren't here yesterday. We need to move." "Wait," Zoe said, turning back toward her preservation pod. "I need to check if anyone else survived. There should have been 12 pods." "Yours is the only active one we found," Riker replied, his tone softening slightly. "The others were either destroyed or empty." Zoe felt a cold weight settle in her chest. 12 pods for the core team members. 12 brilliant minds who had worked together to create something revolutionary, a way to extract energy from the fabric of time itself. And now she was the only one left. "Let me see them," she insisted. Riker hesitated, then nodded. "Quickly, we've got 15 minutes before the next ash storm hits." The expedition team escorted her through the ruins of what had once been the most advanced research facility in human history. The building's architecture was still recognizable beneath its shroud of ash, but strange crystalline formations had begun to grow along the walls, glittering with an internal light that pulsed in an irregular rhythm. "What are those?" Zoe asked, pointing to a particularly large formation. "That's what we're trying to figure out," said a female expedition member, her voice carrying a distinctive accent that Zoe couldn't place. The woman depolarized her visor, revealing sharp features and analytical eyes. "Dr. Novik, xenobiologist, these formations started appearing about 6 months ago. They seem to be growing from the ash itself." They continued through the facility until they reached a large chamber that Zoe recognized as the auxiliary preservation bay. Unlike her pod, which had been in her private laboratory, these pods had been arranged in a circle around a central monitoring station. Most were crushed beneath collapsed ceiling beams or split open, their preservation fields long since failed. Two remained intact but dark, their occupants gone. "Where are they?" Zoe whispered, running her hand along the cold surface of an empty pod. "If they survived, where did they go?" "That's assuming they survived at all," Riker said grimly. "This planet's been quarantined since the incident. Until recently, no one's been allowed to set foot here." "Why now? What changed?" Riker exchanged glances with his team before answering. "The ash is changing. In some places, it's converting back to organic matter. Plants are growing where nothing has lived for centuries. The quarantine was lifted to allow scientific investigation, but now everyone wants a piece of it," finished a stocky man with a military bearing as he depolarized his visor. "Commander Oren, security specialist. 3 different galactic powers have suddenly decided this dead rock is strategically vital. The Federation, the Nexus Coalition, and the Chimera Conglomerate, all claiming territorial rights." Zoe's head spun with the unfamiliar names. The political landscape had clearly shifted dramatically during her long sleep. "I don't understand. Why would anyone want a dead planet?" "Resources," Riker said simply, "or at least the possibility of resources. The temporal engine did something to this world that no one fully understands. The transformation is accelerating and everyone wants to control whatever comes next." A loud crack echoed through the facility, followed by a tremor that sent ash cascading from the ceiling. Zoe stumbled, and Riker caught her arm to steady her. "That's our cue to leave," he said, ushering the team toward the exit. "The temporal instabilities are getting worse." As they made their way outside, Zoe got her first clear view of what had become of her world. The research facility had been built in a lush valley surrounded by mountains and forests. Now those mountains were little more than gray humps on the horizon, and where forests had stood, only ash-covered stumps remained. The sky was a churning mass of amber and crimson, with occasional flashes of blue light that seemed to ripple across the cloud cover. "What happened?" Zoe asked, her voice hollow. "I remember the containment field destabilizing, but this." "Official record says the temporal engine created a quantum cascade effect," Riker explained as they trudged through ankle-deep ash toward a sleek shuttle parked 100 meters away. "It generated a temporal shockwave that instantaneously fossilized everything on the planet, turned it all to ash in a microsecond. The only reason the rest of the star system wasn't affected was because Dr. Jonathan Frost managed to contain the reaction." Zoe stopped abruptly. "Jonathan survived." Riker's expression darkened. "The history books say he sacrificed himself to contain the disaster. He's considered a hero." "No," Zoe said firmly. "That's not right. Jonathan wasn't even at the facility when the containment failed. He was off-world presenting our preliminary findings to the Science Council." The expedition team exchanged uneasy glances. "Dr. Nakamura," Dr. Novik said carefully, "the historical records are quite clear. Dr. Frost died saving what he could of the planet." Another tremor shook the ground, stronger this time. In the distance, a portion of the ashen landscape seemed to ripple like water, then solidify again. "We need to move," Commander Oren urged. "Now." They quickened their pace toward the shuttle. As they approached, Zoe noticed something strange happening to the ash around them. Where their footprints disturbed the surface, tiny green shoots were emerging, instantaneous plant growth following in their wake. "Look," she gasped, pointing at the phenomenon. Dr. Novik knelt to examine the growth. "Fascinating. The composition of these plants doesn't match anything in our database. It's as if they're evolving in real time." "The temporal effect is accelerating," said the 5th team member who hadn't spoken until now. He depolarized his visor to reveal youthful features and eyes that gleamed with intelligence. "Dr. Tenzin, quantum physicist, your successor in a manner of speaking," he added with a respectful nod to Zoe. "If you're here, I assume you've studied my work," Zoe said. "Your theories on temporal energy extraction form the foundation of modern quantum physics," Tenzin replied. "Though no one has attempted to recreate the temporal engine, until recently most believed it was theoretically impossible." "It wasn't impossible," Zoe said quietly, "it was sabotaged." Before anyone could respond to her accusation, a blinding flash lit up the sky, followed by a sonic boom that shook the very air around them. A sleek vessel was descending rapidly through the atmosphere, its hull glowing red-hot from the entry. "That's not the Chancellor's shuttle," Oren said grimly, drawing a weapon from his belt. "Military configuration Federation by the look of it." "We've got company," called a voice from their shuttle. A pilot Zoe hadn't met yet was waving frantically from the cockpit. Multiple ships entering the atmosphere, we need to go now. They broke into a run, ash swirling around them as they sprinted for the shuttle. As they reached it, another tremor, the strongest yet, rippled through the ground. A massive fissure opened up between them and the shuttle, cutting off their escape. The ash and ground beside the fissure began to bulge upward, forming a mound that grew larger by the second. The expedition team backed away, weapons drawn. As the mound cracked open, from within emerged a crystalline structure that bore an unsettling resemblance to a human form. "What is that?" Zoe whispered. Dr. Novik's eyes were wide with excitement and fear. I think it's waking up. The whole planet is waking up." The crystalline figure turned toward them, faceless yet somehow aware. It extended what might have been an arm, pointing directly at Zoe. "It knows you," Riker said, positioning himself between Zoe and the entity. "Impossible," Zoe breathed. A sudden flash of memory hit her, not from before her stasis, but something else. A dream perhaps, or something she had experienced while in suspension. She saw the temporal engine not as it had been, but as it had become, a nexus of temporal energy connecting past, present, and future in ways she had never intended. "We need to get to the central facility," she said urgently. "The primary temporal engine is still active." "That's impossible," Tenzin argued. "The energy output would have been detected." "Not if it's operating outside normal temporal parameters," Zoe countered. The temporal engine wasn't just about energy extraction. It was about creating a sustainable loop, a perfect cycle. Above them, the Federation ship was drawing closer, its weapon systems visibly charging. "We don't have time for a scientific debate," Orin snapped. "We need to get back to orbit before those ships trap us here." "You don't understand," Zoe insisted. "This isn't just about us. If the temporal engine is still active after all this time, it's building up to a critical event. The transformation we're seeing is just the beginning. If we don't stabilize it, everything within 100 light-years could be affected." Riker studied her face intently, then made a decision. "Pilot, circle around and meet us at the primary research facility coordinates." "Are you insane?" Orin demanded. "We have direct orders to return to the ship with any findings." "I'm not going to be responsible for another catastrophe," Riker replied firmly. "If Dr. Nakamura is right, we may be the only ones who can prevent it." He turned to Zoe. "Lead the way, Doctor, but make it quick. We've got incoming from all sides." As if to emphasize his point, two more ships appeared on the horizon, one bearing the triangular insignia of the Nexus Coalition, the other the spiral emblem of the Chimera conglomerate. The race for control of the ash planet had begun in earnest. Zoe nodded grimly and started toward what remained of the central mountain peak, where the heart of the temporal engine lay buried beneath 3 centuries of ash. Behind them, the crystalline figure watched their departure, then slowly began to follow. The last echo of a dead world was growing stronger, and the universe would soon hear its voice again. Echoes of tomorrow. Chancellor Diana Powell stood with perfect composure on the bridge of the diplomatic vessel Concordance, her midnight blue uniform immaculately pressed despite 18 hours of continuous crisis management. At 53, she carried herself with the quiet authority of someone who had negotiated her way through dozens of interstellar conflicts. Her close-cropped platinum hair framed features that rarely betrayed emotion, a vital skill in her line of work. "Chancellor, the Federation fleet has moved into defensive formation around the southern hemisphere," reported her aide, a young diplomat named Elias Mercer. His normally confident demeanor was showing signs of strain. "The Chimera conglomerate continues to hold position over the northern continent, and our Nexus Coalition allies are demanding we take a more aggressive stance." Diana didn't immediately respond, instead studying the holographic display of the ash planet. What had once been a uniform gray sphere was now mottled with patches of green and blue, a transformation accelerating with each passing hour. More concerning were the waves of temporal distortion emanating from the planet's surface, rippling outward like concentric rings in a pond. "Send the following message to all 3 fleets," she finally said, her voice measured and calm. "Any military action taken on or above the planet will be considered an act of war against all neutral parties. The temporal distortions present an existential threat that supersedes territorial claims." Elias looked uncertain. "The Federation Admiral has already stated they consider our presence a violation of their sovereign rights to the planet." "Rights they declared approximately 6 hours ago," Diana replied dryly. "Send the message, then open a direct channel to Dr. Tenzin on the surface team. We need an update on their findings." As Elias hurried to carry out her instructions, Diana turned her attention to the sensor readings. The temporal anomalies were strengthening and the mathematical projections were grim. If the process continued unchecked, the distortions would begin affecting nearby space lanes within 24 hours. Within a week, they would reach populated systems. Chancellor called the communications officer. "We have Dr. Tenzin for you." The holographic display shifted to show the young physicist's face, his features tense with excitement and concern. The image flickered with interference. "Chancellor Powell, we've made an extraordinary discovery," Tenzin said without preamble. "Dr. Nakamura, yes, the Dr. Nakamura has emerged from preservation. She survived the original catastrophe and has critical information about what's happening." Diana's carefully maintained composure slipped for just a moment, her eyebrows rising in genuine surprise. "Zoe Nakamura is alive, the creator of the temporal engine. Very much alive and currently leading us to what she believes is the still-active core of the original device," Tenzin confirmed. "She claims the transformation we're witnessing is the result of temporal backlash, essentially, time catching up with itself after being held in stasis for 3 centuries. "Put her on," Diana instructed. The image shifted again, and Diana found herself looking at a woman who appeared to be in her late 30s despite being chronologically over 300 years old. Dr. Nakamura was moving rapidly through an ash-covered landscape, her preservation suit streaked with gray powder. "Chancellor," Zoe acknowledged curtly, "I don't have much time to explain. The temporal engine was designed to create a sustainable energy loop by harnessing the natural decay of quantum particles across time. When it was sabotaged, it didn't fail. It went into a form of suspended animation, freezing the temporal field around the planet." "Sabotaged by whom?" Diana asked sharply. "My former colleague, Dr. Jonathan Frost," Zoe replied, her voice bitter. "The historical record is wrong. He wasn't a hero trying to contain the disaster. He deliberately caused it." Behind Zoe, Captain Riker came into view, his weathered face grim. "Chancellor, we're being pursued by crystalline entities emerging from the ash. We've lost contact with Commander Oren. He was separated from the group during the last temporal surge. Dr. Novik believes these entities might be the original inhabitants of the planet, preserved in a different state during the temporal freeze." "And the military situation?" Diana inquired, keeping her voice level despite the mounting crisis. "Deteriorating rapidly," Riker replied. "We've spotted Federation ground forces landing near the southern ruins, and Chimera scout ships are conducting low-altitude passes over our position." A sudden tremor shook the camera feed, and for a moment the image distorted wildly. When it stabilized, the landscape behind the team had changed dramatically. What had been a barren field of ash was now erupting with rapid plant growth, trees shooting upward at impossible speeds, their branches unfurling with audible creaks and groans. "The temporal acceleration is intensifying," Zoe explained, her scientific curiosity momentarily overriding her fear. 3 centuries of ecological growth compressed into minutes. We need to reach the central facility before the effect spreads beyond the planet's atmosphere. "You have approximately 4 hours," Diana informed them. "After that, the projections show irreversible damage to the surrounding spacetime fabric." The communication abruptly cut out as another, stronger tremor hit the surface team. Diana turned back to the bridge viewport, where the ash planet was visibly changing before her eyes. Swirls of green and blue were spreading across its surface like ink in water. "Elias," she said decisively, "arrange an emergency conference with the fleet commanders of all 3 powers and prepare my shuttle. I'm going down there." "Chancellor, with respect, that's far too dangerous," Elias protested. "This situation has moved beyond diplomatic protocols," Diana replied, already striding toward the bridge exit. "I need to see this transformation firsthand if I'm going to convince 3 hostile powers not to start shooting at each other." On the planet's surface, Zoe Nakamura led the expedition team through a landscape in violent flux. The ash was receding like an outgoing tide, revealing strange hybrid vegetation beneath, plants that seemed to be evolving even as they grew, adapting to conditions that changed minute by minute. "The original research facility should be just beyond that ridge," she called back to the others, pointing toward a massive crystalline formation that had once been a mountain. The core chamber was built inside the mountain for additional containment. Captain Riker moved up beside her, his environmental suit now torn in several places from their hasty journey. "Those entities are still following us," he said in a low voice, "keeping their distance but definitely tracking our movements." Zoe glanced back. At least a dozen crystalline figures now followed their group, moving with eerie coordination. "They're not hostile," she said with certainty that surprised even her. "They're curious. I think they recognize me somehow." "How is that possible?" Dr. Novik asked, her scientific interest overcoming her fear. If they're the planet's original inhabitants, as I suspect, they would have been transformed during the initial catastrophe, Zoe explained as they continued toward the mountain. The temporal engine didn't just affect physical matter. It altered the fundamental relationship between consciousness and time. These entities might exist partially outside our normal temporal flow. Dr. Tenzin, who had been unusually quiet, suddenly pointed toward the sky. We've got company. A sleek diplomatic shuttle was descending rapidly toward their position, flanked by two military escorts bearing Nexus Coalition markings. The shuttle touched down 100 meters ahead, stirring up clouds of ash that immediately began sprouting with new growth. That's Chancellor Powell's personal vessel, Riker said with surprise. What is she doing down here? The shuttle's hatch opened, and Diana Powell emerged, accompanied by 4 security officers in Nexus Coalition uniforms. The Chancellor strode purposefully toward them, seemingly unperturbed by the chaotic transformation occurring around her. Dr. Nakamura, she greeted Zoe with a formal nod. I'm Chancellor Diana Powell, Interstellar Diplomatic Corps. I've placed myself under considerable risk to see this situation firsthand. The situation is about to get much worse, Zoe replied without ceremony. We need to reach the core facility immediately. A deafening crack split the air as a massive fissure opened in the ground between them and the crystalline mountain. From within the fissure rose a figure that made the expedition team step back in alarm. A humanoid form twice the size of a normal person, its crystalline body pulsing with internal light.